When I was little, I was often told how mature I was. Adults praised me for being calm, thoughtful, and wise beyond my years. At school, my friends were full of energy, running across the playground, yelling over at each other in games, laughing loudly until the teachers had to remind them to use their inside voices. And there I was, sitting quietly on the swings during recess, gently kicking the wood chips beneath my shoes. I wasn't sad. I wasn't shy. I was just observing. But even then, I started to notice something. The kids who were loud got attention. The ones who were bold made friends quickly. The ones who stood out seemed to belong. And somewhere along the way, I started to wonder, why don't I feel like that? At 7 years old, I didn't know the word anxiety. I didn't know a single thing about emotional regulation or mental health. But I knew this. There was an invisible checklist inside my head. And I was always just a few steps behind. I started to compare everything about myself. How fast someone made friends, how confidently they raised their hand in class, how easily they seemed to just be. And I told myself a story, a quiet one, that lived in the background of my mind for years. You're not enough. Not because anyone said it, not because I was failing, but because I had started to believe that being calm meant being behind, that being quiet meant being lesser, that if I wasn't the loudest, the brightest, or the best, I was somehow falling short. And I started to see that show up in so many of my friends. The comparison trap convinces us that we have to be everything, all at once. Be smart, but not too smart. Be confident, but not too much. Be involved, but never overwhelmed. Be perfect, but look effortless. And eventually, we start tying our worth to our performance. Our identity becomes a balancing act. Instead of saying, I'm proud of myself, we ask, am I doing enough? Am I impressive enough? Am I enough? And when that answer feels like no, we don't just slow down. We push harder until we can't anymore. That's what burnout looks like. That's the price of pretending. That's what happens when we believe we have to be okay, even when we're not. According to the CDC, 40% of high school students report feeling persistently sad or hopeless. 1 in 5 teen girls say they've seriously considered suicide This isn't just a phase. It's a crisis. When I joined a neuroscience program at Duke University, I learned how stress, especially chronic, high-pressure stress, literally changes the way our brains work. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for focus and decision-making, weakens. The amygdala, our brain's emotional center, becomes hypersensitive, like a smoke alarm going off all the time. And the more we hide how we feel, the more our brains change, and the more suppressed we become. I remember feeling like I had to be the responsible one, just because I wasn't the loudest or the most outgoing. I leaned into being the calm, reliable girl. I didn't ask for help. I didn't want to seem dramatic. I just kept performing fine. But inside, I wasn't. And I saw my friends doing the same. Hiding stress behind perfect grades, smiling through social drama, pretending everything was fine because that's what we thought we had to do. We're often told that we have to be perfect all the time. It leads us into a constant state of never feeling like we're enough. And that changes us. That changes who we are, how we act, what we do. And I want to share that story with you because I saw how it changed me. One of the days that I felt really overwhelmed and upset, I came home from school with so much to do. My parents had been fighting all week. Not loud, but tense. The kind of silence you can feel in your bones. On top of it all, I had a club deadline, multiple assignments, and a smile I couldn't hold anymore. I glared at my to-do list, with palms sweating and shaking, trying to convince myself I could just push through like always. But I couldn't. So I closed the laptop. I lay down on the floor, and I finally said it out loud. I'm not okay. And maybe that's okay. That moment didn't make me weak. It made me honest. And honesty with myself finally gave me the one thing I hadn't felt in weeks: relief. I used to feel like I had to hide how I felt before I could be finally taken seriously. But after I was finally honest with myself and I gave myself that one thing I had been looking for, something changed. At home, I started opening up to my mom more. Not everything at once, but in pieces. Instead of trying to make her feel proud of me all the time, I started communicating with her about how I was truly feeling. And little by little, the more I softened with myself, the more space I gave others to be soft too. That's the part we never talk about. When you admit you're not okay, you're not just helping yourself. You're giving permission to everyone else around you who's pretending. Being not okay and admitting it isn't a weakness, but instead a strength. Here's what neuroscience taught me. When you're finally honest with yourself about how you feel, your brain starts to let go of all of the stress and all of the unwanted feelings it felt it had to have before, and it felt like it had to pretend. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning and focus, starts to get disrupted when we hide how we feel. Your hippocampus, which is tied to memory and learning, begins to shrink. The more we hide how we feel, the harder it becomes to even know who we are. Chronic emotional suppression activates the amygdala, your body's stress center. So the more stress you feel, the more stress that rewires your key systems. So to all of the students out there like me, the quiet ones, the overachievers, the "you're so mature" kids, you don't have to earn your breakdown. You are allowed to not feel okay. And to the adults out there, the teachers, the parents, the mentors, many of you were never able to hear this as a kid. You were taught to hold it in, to push through, to be strong before you were allowed to be soft. But it's not too late. You are allowed to not feel okay too. And when you hear someone say, "I'm not okay," hear it as leadership. Hear it as courage. Because a generation that knows it's okay to not be okay is a generation that can grow, adapt, think, create, and lead like we've never seen before. Not because we're always perfect, but because we're finally real. Thank you.